Great. Welcome everyone to our June First Friday event. And today we are delighted to have Jacob and Theo with us as our guests. And the topic of today's conversation is all around social media, which is a very important topic for any franchisor. Jacob is from Ad Plenty and Theo is from Franscape, as well as being the franchisor of Swimtime. And together they've joined forces to develop a new system which has achieved some fabulous results within the Swimtime business. I'm going to pass over to Jacob. I think, Jacob, you're in charge of the tech from your end. And again, Jacob and Theo are going to talk about the aspects of what they've been doing, but also just to set the scene in terms of for any new franchisors, in terms of ownership of the assets, ownership of the collateral, what you need to do as a minimum, because it's one of the things that we find with new franchisors, if you like, obviously they don't understand the need for the franchisor to really own the assets in terms of the social media and manage them accordingly. So I shall pass over to you, Jacob, now to lead the tech from here, and I'm sure you're perfectly capable of doing that much more than me.
Hopefully. Thank you, Joe. Let me just share my screen. I hope that this. Yeah, just get it in presentation mode. Hang on. Yeah, I'm not used to presenting in Zoom, but here we go. Just bear with me a second. There we go. Okay. Should be a full screen now, I hope.
Yeah, all good.
All good. All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Jacob. I'll briefly introduce myself on the next slide and just say that the session here today with myself and Theo from Friendscape is about what happens when you have two individual marketing platforms or business intelligence platforms, and you utilize both of their strengths and merge them, and what the outcome can be. It was an idea I had when I learned of what Theo was building about a year ago. And then we very quickly sat down and built the case that we are going to take you through today. So it's really a story about what happens when we connect two platforms and allow data to flow between them. Because what we've seen is that when operational data and marketing intelligence is flowing freely, and we can move beyond just pure automation, which everyone is talking about today, and reporting, we've actually managed to, in all modesty, I think, to create an ecosystem that is able to identify opportunities and make smarter decisions and faster decisions. And as you will see, drive growth at scale in across a franchise network that very much relies on bookings, or fill inventory, as I like to say. So I'll just start with a very quick introduction to Ad Plenty, and it's not going to be a shameless plug of our system, but I do feel that it's essential just to understand what we're doing to try and set the scene before I leave it to Theo to kind of lay out the case for you and what we did. And Theo is by far the most intelligent person among me and him in terms of the tech aspect. But it is important just to understand what we're doing in Ad Plenty. Just a little bit about myself. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from the UK. I'm Danish, and our offices at Plenty is in Copenhagen. We are active across 11 markets currently, and our marketing platform has, and I think, an average of 5,000 local users a month, and a couple of thousand campaigns that we roll out. And my position in the company as a commercial director. Before that, I spent the better part of 15 years working as a CMO and sales director within franchising businesses. So I carry a lot of love for this particular business model, and that experience from what happens in the operational part of the business I've taken into to the business of At Plenty, where we very much work with the tech part of supporting franchisors and franchisees with their local marketing efforts. Before I delve into it, when you hear the word local marketing, I think it's very important, at least from our perspective, to just try and pin down what we mean when we say local marketing. And what we mean is it's really about tailoring products and services to fit a franchisee's particular markets and region. So it actually responds to the local community's needs and preferences. And although you're in a national franchise business, there's still very much local differences that you can utilize and adapt to. So that's what we mean when we talk about local marketing. And why we believe that it's important is simply because across the various businesses we work with, we simply see a far better performance when you're addressing your local community where they are, and when you allow them to get to know you as a business owner or as a franchisee in that area. So that's why we're very much focused on local marketing. However, talking about or looking at the typical challenges that we see when we speak to franchisors in terms of why it's difficult for them to operationalize a local marketing strategy is there's three in general, and these are very general speaking because obviously there can also be other factors involved. But what we generally tend to see is for local franchisees, there tend to be a lack of how to do local marketing. They simply don't know how to do it. They're not sure what is expected of them. And to be honest, sometimes time is also of the essence. They simply don't have the time to do it. Another factor or thing that factors in when franchise or franchisors are a little bit reluctant to let local franchisees run their own marketing is that sometimes it can tend to go a little bit beyond what the brand is actually about. I think we all know about Canva. We especially see a lot of franchisees who love it, and sometimes what they create is not always true to the brand. I think that's just putting it modestly to say that sometimes brand coherence goes out the window when you open up Canva. So some franchisors are a little reluctant to open up their CVI because how do we manage? How are we making sure that they're communicating in line with our brand, in line with our messaging? But I think the third aspect and where we see that it's the biggest barriers for franchisors is if you want to run what I would call a hyper-local marketing approach, if you as a franchisor would absorb that responsibility, it's simply too costly and time-consuming to manage on a head office. Just imagine having 20 franchisees and you have to make local marketing, on their behalf. Or if you don't want, you don't want to do it, you don't have the time to do it, you would need to go out and buy that service or simply just hire headcounts to do it for you. So there's a time issue, and there's definitely also a constraint in terms of budgets to run this. So these are some of the three typical challenges we see when we go into to local franchise businesses. And why we think or why we know this is important is At Plenty is not an agency as such. The way we see ourselves is a workflow tool among a head office for franchisors and franchise businesses or franchisees to easily execute local marketing without being experts or without having that specialized knowledge of knowing with knobs and levers to pull inside of the Meta Business Manager. Our aim is to make it accessible to everyone. And although I mentioned Canva before, it's kind of funny that the way Canva kind of became what Canva did to Photoshop to kind of democratize the way that everyone should be able to um, to handle creatives and build their own creatives. It's kind of like what we would like to do to local digital marketing across franchise networks is to make it accessible to everyone, so you don't have to be an expert, neither at head office nor at franchisee level, because they're mostly preoccupied with running their business. They don't have to be or shouldn't have to be digital experts to create a good funnel of customer inflows. So the problem is that even though most of the franchisors we speak to know that this is important, there's still data that supports that it's simply just it's a daunting task for many to actually execute a local marketing strategy due to time constraints. And so often, what we see is that you would fall back to a more generic campaign activity where it's kind of like the same assets, it's the same text, the same images that you just run across all your locations. The problem is it's not very local, and performance is simply poorer than if you would put in the work and create those localized variants of what you're doing out there. So with that in mind, what we're doing in our platform is we created this tool specifically built for franchise businesses or multi-location businesses. So it's kind of the niche that we're working in. And we're targeting everyone in a franchise system who wants to run coordinated digital marketing. Um, so what our system does, just in essence, is that it creates local variants of the posts that you put up on Facebook or Meta, where you want to post it, and also ads. And then our system can just push it out to the franchise network in a workflow. The example is that if you have an offer to say this now, in a minute, Theo will present Swimtime and Friendscape. So Swimtime, there's like open classes for swimming lessons. Then instead of setting up 20 different variants of these classes, and you have to copy paste 20 different ad sets or different organic posts and go in and do the amendments and change the text and potentially also change the image. You set up one creative in our system, and our system will automatically create the 20 variants and send them to that local area because we have all that data in our platform. So that's kind of the core of what our system does, and that can be managed from a head office perspective. You just push it across your franchisees if you don't want them to do it, or you can open up and let them do it themselves within that playing field that the franchisor has defined, so they really can't go out of bounds, so to speak. So that is kind of the essence of what we're doing, and we integrate to all these different platforms. And before I leave you, just this brief introduction before I will pass you over to Theo. So that was kind of the core. That's the core offering of what we're doing in At Plenty. And as I started out saying, I think about a year and a half ago, I learned about what Theo was doing with Friendscape, building that CRM system and having that data. I had the idea of what if we started integrating all that live data, all that real-time data Theo has in his system across some of the franchisors, and we simply just ask that to fetch the ads or posts inside of At Plenty. So all you had to do is decide on, what kind of ads are we running and let the system do it on its own. I think it was kind of a crazy idea I had, but the minute I sat down with Theo, he instantly got what I was talking about, and we built the case that he's going to unfold for you now. So that's it for me, and I think Theo, I will let you continue.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, afternoon, everybody. I think I'll need you to keep sharing, my friend. Is that all right, Jacob? And
Do you want me to keep sharing?
I've not got a copy of the slides, the latest version.
I will.
So is that okay? Are you okay to share?
Yeah, no worries.
I might have to do old COVID SCART style, like next slide, please, back from the
I'll be
Chris
your
days, if
assistant.
those remember that. Classic. We'll be
Absolutely.
fine. Yeah, we don't miss those days, but that's about the only one I can think of. Sorry, Jacob. I've got a copy of them, just not your copy. So I think you might have tweaked them a little bit.
Oh, no. This works. This works.
Cool. Oh, we can skip over that one. Everyone knows who I am, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that saves us a bit of time. Yeah, well, what I will say is sort of, as Jacob alluded to, a lot of this has come through a partnership. We talk to a lot of partners in the franchising community. Um, some do more words than actions, but I can definitely vouch for Jacob and his team for actually taking actions and working with us on this. And I think is a great example of collaboration in the industry and what we can do. So yeah, it'll be a pleasure to talk you through it. Those of you who've heard me speak before might have heard bits of this, but I'm happy to go into as much depth as people want to a little bit later on. But just to set the scene on Swimtime, for those of you who don't know, Swimtime was founded in about 1998. I purchased it in 2016 off the founders and really took it into its sort of next chapter. And we've delivered well over 10 million lessons to children all across the UK. We operate over in excess of 150 locations. Very much a sort of a mature business, I guess. So for those of you on the call that work with clients or are businesses like that, then we sort of feel your pain, because obviously you're trying to keep things nice and innovative and fresh, and keep people motivated. We've got a really kind of long-standing network, which is both a blessing and a curse. We've got a good mix of turnover, but we've got some people who have been with us almost from the beginning. So it's a real mix over there. So yeah, this project was really, really interesting. And as kind of Jacob was alluding to, in our business, keeping the top of the funnel moving and dynamic is really, really important. Yes, we have quite a long lifetime of a client. It averages about 700 days on average is how long a client's with us across the estate. And that does vary region to region quite aggressively. But kids get old and they find other things of interest. So it's really important for us to keep a pipeline coming in. Next one, please, Jacob.
Yeah.
Awesome. So apologies for teaching anybody to suck eggs here who very much knows its insides out, but I sometimes think it's really good to almost just go back to basics. And so when we got our hands on Swimtime, the thing that we sort of found very, very quickly is, the UK is full of amazing swim schools, not just in franchising, of which there's many excellent brands, but actually, all across the UK. I would tell you now, like, use Swimtime, don't use Swimtime, you almost certainly will have an excellent swimming lesson. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First off is swimming teaching is regulated, so you have to be qualified. So assuming somebody is qualified, then you're going to get a good standard. Secondly, generally anybody teaching kids to swim is pretty passionate by nature and pretty kind of pastoral as an individual. And the third thing is that kind of the reality is that unless human beings are going to grow another limb, kind of how we teach our kids to swim is there's a relatively narrow band of innovation. Yes, there's technology coming in and various other bits and different sort of toys and methodologies and all that stuff, but generally speaking, that the scope for innovation in how we teach people to swim is relatively narrow. The thing I think we got really right with Swimtime in the early doors is we recognise that the experience of our brand goes beyond what happens in the water. So it's quite holistic. So when you see on the screen there's kind of, it starts from the moment that somebody becomes aware of our brand, and therefore we like to find those touch points align with those brand values, and they have that kind of theming and that commonality of voice, that tone of voice. But we wanted the whole process to be really special. We wanted the purchase journey to be as easy as possible. We wanted the way that we recognize our customers to be as easy as possible. And crucially, which no one ever talks about in business, which I find very odd, is we wanted the process of somebody leaving Swimtime to be as easy as possible as well. Because for somebody to be leaving Swimtime, it's normally a moment of great celebration, because it normally means the kid can swim. And that's fabulous. And we want them to leave. We want them to go in the community and be really happy. And the best thing is, and there's a good adage of this, like with restaurants, that you typically will tell people if you've had a really great meal, and it's word of mouth is one of the most powerful things that we can do. So that's why we've always focused on this entire life cycle of the journey. But essentially with kind of our methodology, what we wanted to do was kind of not ignore stages 3 and 4, because that's the wrong thing to say. And sometimes people think that's what I mean when I talk about this stuff on stage. I don't mean that. What I think is stages 1, 2, and 5 need as equal weight and attention as stages 3 and 4. And what we've done at Swimtime is build a digital ecosystem and build a data set that really helps us nail stages 1, 2, and 5. And obviously, this case study is very much focusing on the stage 1 of awareness. Thanks, Jacob. So the first thing, sorry, next one. Thank you. So yeah, the first thing that we kind of got right, and I think this is super important, is recognizing that convenience can attract a premium. So a really good example of this is Amazon. A lot of us shop on Amazon in our daily lives. If you want to check this when you get home, feel free. You'll pretty much find that any product that you buy on Amazon, Amazon is not the cheapest. You'll often be able to buy it cheaper somewhere else. The reason is what I call the can't be asked theory. You're on your phone, you're on your sofa, you realize you want to buy X, Y, Z. You cannot be asked to go and shop around. Amazon have got your card details, you've got the app on your phone, you just book it. So convenience can have a premium, right? So one of the first things we did is think about how can we make that flow and that sort of the way that customers get from A to B within our business as quick as possible. And you can see the VTs running on the side of how we've done that on mobile. And whilst it looks hopefully quite simple and quite pleasing to the eye, the technology behind it that makes that happen, that allocates the revenues to the right franchise, manages all the territories, blah, 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 is extremely complicated and really, really sophisticated. But the first thing we got right is this. And the reason I'm saying this is if you haven't, as a brand, quite got this right, it doesn't, well, not strictly speaking, but generally speaking, it doesn't matter how good your advertising is. If your customers are going to come off your advertising and go through a process that's a bit unpleasant, you're probably not going to get the results that we're about to go through today. And I think that's really important to stress. I'm not saying it won't add value and you won't get leads from it, but that whole life cycle is really, really important. And this part that I'm going through now is the bit nobody wants to tackle because it's arduous, it's painful, it requires a lot of detail. But if you can go through it and do it properly, the rewards are really, really incredible. Next one, please, Jacob. So, yeah, as we start to scale across multiple locations, these problems start to compound massively. That is a genuine screenshot of, I think, a 100-mile radius of Birmingham of all the different locations you can buy from Swimtime. So you can imagine that complexity for us as a brand to get a handle on all those different locations, their availability of kids, their availability of customers, teachers, all that good stuff gets very, very complex. Not least of all, because one of the best things about franchising is this idea that you're creating a community brand, right? So what we say to our franchisees is, we want you to put services and not sell products, but provide services within your community that are relevant to your community. So, for example, we might have a franchisee that has, for example, a community with a lot of SEN children with educational needs. We would encourage them to put a higher provision of those on versus maybe a franchisee that's maybe operating out of a university or something where that's not as prevalent. So we want our franchisees to be flexible. So once you compound this stuff together, suddenly the scale kind of goes to the roof. Next one, please, Jacob. So what we essentially done with Franscape, and this is kind of another bit really, in my experience, there might be people on the call who don't have this or aren't aware of this, but 99% of brands I speak to, this is the problem, is the data sits in silos. So franchisee A has a set of data, B has a set of data, C has a set of data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you end up with 50, 100, 250, how many locations you've got of different data sets. This is a complete disaster for so many levels. A really great example of this is, say, for example, you might want to profile exit reasons. You might find you've got 5 different spellings of the word sickness, or that's a classic that we found out when we first got into Swimtime, or the way somebody would describe a certain thing changes. So even when you start to kind of run basic analysis, all the wheels fall off. The biggest thing that we did with Swimtime to get this right was create what we call a single source of truth. So the data for the entire Swimtime as a brand sits in one giant system, and we can see every single layer. The territory layer, the franchise layer, the location layer, the class layer, and right down to the customer layer. And that is the fundamental building blocks that helps us do really cool stuff with Jacob. Because when Jacob and his team say to us, we want to know a specific set of customers in this location that do this, we can provide it. And we've started to build that intelligence over and over again. And essentially what we do is we pipe that data at scale anonymously to AdPlenty. So they have access to an enormous pipe of data. We obviously strip all the identifying information out. We respect GDPR, obviously. Side note, about 78% of people consent to give data from GDPR, so we get a lot of it. And we pipe that to AdPlenty. And then what these guys are then doing is building the learnings off these algorithms. And on the next slide, we'll give you an example, I hope. Yeah, awesome. I forgot which slide was coming up, but this gives you an idea of how we can visualize some of this data. So you can see here, I've frosted it out for GDPR reasons, but each of those rows there are franchisees, and we've got individual KPIs. So we can see their occupancy level live in real time, their bookings, their revenue, etc. Next one, Jacob. Cool. So this is essentially the nub of what happens. This is about as technical as we're going to get. So I'm sorry for those that this is a bit like Jesus, but hopefully it's I'll keep it as light touch as I can. So essentially, if you, as I've just said, Franscape has got all of the data. It knows everything about our business at any one time. It knows exactly where we have children, where they are in the program, their location, etc., etc. And essentially, it goes at a point, hello, I would like a child, please. And normally that's based on occupancy. So when the class falls below 80% full, it will go, hello, I would like a kid. What it will do then is fire a message to Add Plenty that says, I would like a kid in this location. These are the prices my lessons are. This is who the teacher is that's running it. And this is what's happening at that lesson, right? It fires that bit of information to Add Plenty. Add Plenty suck that up and go, great. Well, that's ad X with image Y, with messaging Z, whatever it might be. And it will run that advert. I'm going to show you a slide in a minute, what the adverts actually look like so you can actually visualize it. It runs the ad. We will then monitor the success and the bookings. And the minute that that class is full, we will stop that advert because there's no point advertising for something we can't sell. And the budget then moves to the next advert. And essentially have this wheel that just goes round and round and round and round. And the risk of using a slightly untimely analogy, it's a bit like the difference between using an AK-47 and a laser-guided missile. So what you're doing is using your marketing budget in an extremely targeted way rather than spraying and praying. And that means that your pound that you're spending on media is a lot more efficient. And we're going to show you the results in a few moments so you can actually visualize that. Next one, please, Jacob. So this is the visualization of it. When Jacob did his slides a bit earlier, you actually saw a more updated set of media adverts. We've improved them since. This was actually from the beginning of the section. All I want you to draw your attention to is kind of the bottom but one line where it says Village Hotels Blackpool on the left and Delmini Resort Hotels on the right. Okay, so they are two swimming pools that we operate in the North Lancashire territory. Now, what data tells us and human behavior psychology tells us is that if an advert feels relevant to an audience member, okay, and has an element of familiarity, something they recognize, something that resonates, be that an image or a word, they are 33% more likely to engage and 11% more likely to click on it. Those are the statistics. So in this example here, simply by rather saying than swimming lessons available today and changing that to swimming lessons available today at Village Hotels Blackpool, and a customer in that region is from Blackpool and goes, oh, I know where that is, they are a third more likely to read that ad and about 11% more likely to click. That's simple. So that is essentially the principle that we've leveraged and compounded. Now, the next layer about this, which gets ever so slightly complex, is then who you're targeting. So we've talked about what the ads says to make it relevant. The next part of that is who sees the ads. And I'm sure you all know that one of the benefits of the digital platforms is you can choose audiences of who you want to see that advert. The next part of that is because we know a huge amount of information about who our customers are in a GDPR way. We know where they live. We know what they've spent. We know how long they're with us. We know what teacher they like. We can start to build incredibly accurate, ideal customer profiles. And we effectively create a mirror of that customer profile. And as we've run this project over and over again, and we've extended it, that data gets richer and richer and richer. Because the thing we figured out was, and I got this wrong, I was a bit of a cynic, I'll be honest with you. I thought Google, TikTok, and Meta and all these people, their only job was to take as much money as possible and run 1,000,000 miles and go and try and build rockets or whatever it might be. I was wrong about that. They are actually competing aggressively. And actually, each of those platforms want to deliver for you the best bang for your buck because they want you to put more of your spend with them. So what's really interesting about this is the more data you give these platforms, and I stress in a GDPR compliant way, so if you have the consent, the more data you give them, the better they get. If you tell these platforms loads about the customers, it's easier for them to find customers that are lookalikes. And so by combining those two things together is what really, really delivered the results. I can see a question here from Simon of who owns the customer data, the franchisor or the individual franchisee. In our franchise agreements, Simon, it's the brand, but I guess it depends on different franchise agreements, but in ours, it's the brand. So I hope that helps. Next slide, please, Jacob. There's not too much more, I don't think, from memory. Yeah, so we're just getting the results of this program. So we've been running this for a significant amount of time now. Forgive me, I've not updated this since September because I've used some of these decks before. That's my bad, but they're equally as impressive. So obviously with swimming, forgive me for stating the obvious, we're a seasonal business. We follow the academic timetable. September is our biggest month of the year because it's back to school. Hopefully that isn't too surprising. So we had a very, very strong influx from this program in September. So nearly 1,400 customers, really, really strong. Next one, please, Jacob. It's these figures that are absolutely genuine and blow my mind. So on the middle column is the industry average for our sector. That doesn't mean it would be the same numbers for you in whatever sector that you're in. But you can see on Google pay-per-click, it's between 15 and 35 pounds. And for Meta, it's 20 to 40. And the results on the right-hand side are what we paid for a lead. So £3.66 and £6.47. And next one, please. And to show, oh, yeah, there we go, a few. To show this is not BS, because I know some people come on these things and give BS. That is genuinely our Google Ads statistics that came off the campaign that we did. So you can see there, we did 777 conversions. The value of those conversions is in what went through the till was 23,000. It cost us in media 2.85 thousand, which gets you the £3.36. But there is a kicker point here that everybody misses, right? Those of you who are listening attentively will have remembered a few moments ago, I said the average lifetime of our client is about 650 to 700 days. Right, that's the average across our business. And this is the kicker everyone misses. When you've paid for a client and acquired it, as long as you don't do a terrible job, that client will stay with you. Right, so that 23,000, that's what went through the till on month one. It's not what goes to till month 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So in reality, I can multiply that 23,000 by 2x, 3x, 4x, pick a number. In my case, for the purpose of this case study, I rounded it to 200,000, which is what I said for 2,000 advertising spend, we delivered 200,000 of revenue. Because the bit people miss is once you got a client in the ecosystem, they're very cheap to keep hold of. And that is the value behind this. And when I stood up stage at the BFA conference and I said, why, oh, why, oh, why as an industry do we spend hours upon hours of arguing or having a debate about who should pick up the tab? Is it the Z? Is it the ZOR? Who's spending marketing levy on what, this, whatever it might be? With numbers like this, the argument goes away, right? If your MSF is 10%, 10% of £23,000 is less than 2,850, right? So you might as well pay it yourself. And that's the position we've got in the Swimtime, right? We might as well just pay the advertising as a ZOR because we make as much money as the Z's do. And this is the beauty of this model. The argument debate is gone. It's finished. So all I do as a ZOR and all Rachel does as my manager director, who is also is equally responsible for this magic as I am, by the way, is we just turn the wheel faster and faster. We just spend more and more and more and more, and we grow and we grow and we grow. And our business grew 20% last year, and we're currently on about 23% growth this year with no additional franchise sales. That is pure system sales revenue from a business that's 25 years old. And I think the biggest thing we did differently, as Jacob said at the start, is we connected the data sets together and we started to pull the value across the marketing chain. And it works. I think that might be the last slide.
Yeah, it is.
It is. There we go.
Yeah.
Super.
There's a question, I think. What's the typical time frame to set up for a new franchise or client? Are you asking for Ad Plenty, my friend, or Franscape as well, or both, or separate, or
both? Just out of curiosity, just so we know for future reference.
would you want to go first, Jacob? You're quicker than me, I think.
It depends on setup. We talk about setting up on Ad Plenty. It's something we can do within weeks. It's about just creating a platform, creating the right integrations to, if it's Meta, just to get the right sockets and plugs, and then we're ready to go. And if you're talking about a system as we've done here with Theo, in terms of Franscape, now we have a very good understanding of how each other's platforms work. So it's something that in like half an hour, then we're up and running, and it's just yeah.
I think from our side, the issue is always the squidgy bit in the middle. It's not the tech. We can have this tech up and running in weeks. Honestly, for an average network now is about 100 Zs. In reality, to get everything up and running, everyone comfortable, we've got through all the screams and the tears and the axe throwing and all that, it's about a year in reality. And I'm not saying that, that's probably me being a shit salesman, but the reality is it does. By the time you've done it properly, you've thought through it, you've gone through the change process, you've got your benchmark data, and you're starting to make changes, that's the reality. That's when you can really start to go. But if you're a new client, it's weeks. If you're particularly aggressive and want to go through like a hot knife through butter, crack on. There's nothing stopping you, but it's a human process in the day.
Theo, did you experience any resistance? You mentioned app throwing, etc., with your franchisees, because you've also mentioned that you've got a very varied network in terms of how long they've been with you, and probably an appetite for technology as well.
Yeah, so the original change probably happened in about 2017. So, I mean, to not put too fine off point on it, we lost a third of our network. But that's because I told them either they got on board with this journey or they can go. And it turns out I was right. That sounds like a bit Machiavellian, but I mean, at the end of the day, we went through a very long listening exercise. We set out a really clear strategy that where we felt the brand needed to go to meet the market. We dealt with any objections. We came up with a plan. And in my opinion, there's a point where enough's enough. The tail ain't wagging the dog. It's my business. It's my brand. I will listen. I will. But there's a point where enough's enough. And I said, that's it. Either you're in or you're out. I don't mind what you want to do, but you're out. And that's where we got to. There's another aspect to that, which is by putting Franscape in, we very quickly identified significant breach of standards. We had significant amount of theft that had been going on, safety issues across the board. So it's not just a case of I wanted a shiny system in and you're not going on the journey. By having a single source of truth, it shone a spotlight very, very quickly and radically on what truly was happening in the business. And at the risk of being controversial, I know that pretty much every franchisor in this country will have something of that nature going on.
What's at your door?
Because every client that we've been with has been through the same thing.
Right, thank you, and thank you for your openness there, Jacob. Simon, I think you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I'm very polite, aren't I, putting my hand up? Theo.
Only call me that on weekend, Simon. Come on.
I'm sorry. Look, it's massively impressive, but it wouldn't be right if I didn't play devil's advocate in all of this. But if I was a franchise litigation lawyer, for example, in the current environment and narrative around franchising, my spider senses will be twitching a little bit, because how you've presented this, there is a massive over-reliance on you as a franchisor. And I would argue, why do you need a franchise network anyway? You potentially don't. You just need a network of swimming instructors. So how do you mitigate that balance? Because, as I said, if I was a franchise litigation lawyer, I would say, are you not exposing yourself to quite a high degree of risk, particularly if there's a dispute with a franchisee, that a judge, for example, would be looking at this and saying, well, hang on, you do everything for your franchisees. They're more akin to an employee than a separate business entity. And the other thing is, again, and this is not a criticism, it's just an observation as somebody who's a bit of a nerd around franchising. How do you overcome the pricing issue? Because, by doing it so centrally, you're almost dictating the pricing strategy for your franchisees as well. How do you take account of regional variances? So I think, whilst I think it's absolutely fantastic, and there's a good reason why, you are probably a very lone voice in this because of your business. I think that a lot of franchisors are also mindful of the risks that they potentially expose themselves to because of the over-reliance on the franchisor in the relationship. Is that a worthy comment, or am I just being stupid?
It's a definitely worthy comment. I think it's great to have the debate. So let's just pick up with the control point. So I don't think Franscape is any different. Well, it is different because it's good, but conceptually, is it any different of having any other CRM? Ultimately, I would argue it is, because it's shit. I think it's shit hot. But you go and get Salesforce, there's plenty of big brands that have big software platforms. So I don't see the kind of risk element from my perspective on that. I'm just providing a bit of software that does stuff.
Yeah.
That the capability points, there's, conceptually, there's no real additional capability beyond anything else other than it works very, very well, in my opinion, and people might have a different opinion. Just tackling the point on pricing. Pricing is free, Simon. So every franchisee is free to set whatever price they want. We don't dictate that. There is no predictive element like Uber. There's no search. There's nothing like that. So the franchisee is still setting pricing, securing local venues, building relationships in the community, hiring teachers, in charge of standards, in charge of all the customer service. That is all the same. The only thing we are doing, I guess, maybe differently is we are managing or providing the national campaign of inbound, but they still do local campaigns. They're still expected to go to local school events, go to local fetes. I would come back to you and say, is what we do any different to a big national fast food chain running enormous TV campaigns or sponsoring the World Cup? Or is that any different? We have a marketing levy that we charge and we spend it on with Jacob and other partners as well. So I'm struggling to see that it's different, but I think it's definitely an interesting debate to have for sure.
I mean, and these. Sorry, carry on, Julie.
No, I was just going to say we've got Kat on the call, so obviously we've talked about legal. It'd be useful to get an input from you, Kat, if you happy to do so in terms of the legal. You know, when I say legal aspect, not in terms of illegal, just the approach from a lawyer.
Yeah. So if we were to say I knew nothing about you, Theo, and because obviously you watched this presentation whenever you've talked about it before, it is amazing. But say I knew nothing of you, and I was looking at a franchise agreement, assuming your franchise agreement states in some form or other that you do this, or the franchisee was aware of it, I would be concerned with the cautious hat on to say, what happens if the technology behind it all suddenly falls flat and there's the over reliance on the franchisor. So it would be something that we would raise on a franchise agreement review with concern. But it may well be that you then speak to the franchisee and they're comfortable with it. I don't know what your franchise agreement states in terms of what you are committed to on the franchisor's obligations or in the marketing bit. How protected are you in terms of what you're actually committing to would be my comments on it.
Yeah, I guess I'm still struggling with the fact that I don't really see what's fundamentally different to any other brand that does national marketing, nor any other brand that runs a CRM or booking system or operation system. There's an ERP system here that runs the business, which every brand that we all know of has a version of. You might say it's good, you might say it's bad. That's just a fact. And then there's plenty of brands that run all sorts of different types of marketing campaigns nationally. Well, I'm struggling to see what the difference is.
Well, Theo, let's face it, when a franchisor introduces a new system, whatever it is, franchisees can't pick and choose in terms of whether they choose to take that system or not. It's there, whether it's CRM,
Exactly.
as you say, whether it's Ad Plenty, whatever it is. Once it's the adopted system, it's the adopted system for everyone. I think an interesting aspect to all of these, kind of questions in terms of is it good, bad, and I think it's very good indeed, is the ability the attractiveness when a franchisee comes to resale. So you've obviously been doing this since like 2016, 17. Potentially during that time, between then and now, 10 years, you've had franchisees who've resold the business and
absolutely,
there's going concerns
well
with capital values and capital assets, etc.
Well, it's been strong. I mean, a good example is, some of the earliest franchisees that predate us bought it for say £7,500, which seems comical now. They've now got genuinely businesses doing £1 million a year turnover. Our average net profit is about 21%. Our top performers are at 30%. So I've always seen my role as a franchisor and my team is fundamentally to build wealth in an ethical way, whilst happening to save people's lives, which is quite nice. So I hear everybody's kind of concerns. They're absolutely fair and reasonable, particularly where tech's heading more broadly. Of course it is, particularly over reliance. At that point there is something I worry about a lot. And, we spend a vast sum of money on resilience, on backups, on cyber, on all sorts of things. I still worry. But in the day, we're driving wealth and we're driving wealth for our network and building prosperous businesses for our people. And I think as long as that remains ethical, that's something to be celebrated. I think it's a great advertising for franchising. Yeah. And not only that, we're pushing the innovation. I think hopefully I won't get too much trouble here, but I think it's fair to say that franchising wasn't necessarily the byword innovation in the past. And I think now, particularly what Jacob and I do together, it's pretty on the bleeding edge, and suddenly are people saying, shit, well, if I want to be part of this level of innovation, maybe I've got to look at a franchise that's got that backing. And I think that's good.
Yeah.
Even if you don't buy a
Yeah.
Swimtime franchise, it's
Yeah.
pushing everybody up the
I
tree a
don't,
bit.
I don't really have a view on it, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, I just presented it as being a logical question, and based on some of the, I guess, recent case law and case history and stuff like that. I don't really have a specific view on it. I think, these things.
Well, our next First Friday is about legislation and should it be, in the UK, etc. But we'll come on to that then. I think, Theo, for me, a good, for want of a better word, analogy. If I think of an earlier First Friday, we had a First Friday with Melvin Lusty, who ran Rainbow International, and Melvin took that business from being, in effect, a domestic carpet cleaning service to being a supplier to corporates, insurance companies of fire, flood, and whatever service. He couldn't do that by franchisees opting out of providing the service that the insurance companies needed. So he had to take the franchisees and carry the franchisees with him. And knowing Melvin, there wasn't any opportunity not to be involved. You would either be in or you would be out, and that would be it. But ultimately, he built his business and the franchisee's business into an absolutely, cracking, valuable asset. And I think, again, in terms of your franchisees, if you've got for your franchisees that are producing EBITDA of like 300K, and you put a multiplier in there, that's a very valuable asset. And the level of due diligence when someone comes to sell is going to be very significant. So the fact that if you've got franchisees who are selling capital assets of that value, then I guess it's passing all of the tests that anyone could run over it.
I hope so, and I think it's important to stress as well. We've consistently got the 5-star workplace satisfaction. We're BFA members. We're put through interrogation as we should be. We're happy to be held to account. I'd be happy for anybody on the call to speak to any of our franchisees. I haven't got anything to hide. I think they're happy, but they're not telling me something. They seem pretty happy.
Franchisee he's gonna love something like this, where somebody's doing the marketing for them. They're doing it in a really, really efficient and innovative way, and they're doing it incredibly cost effectively. What's not to like about that? I take on board what you say, Kat, that if it goes wrong, then the franchisor carries a bit of a risk for that, because if you've performed at a certain level, if that performance drops off, there is a threat about that. But I don't see it going that way. It's going the other way. If you stay at the leading edge, if you stay at the cutting edge, this technology is enabling now. It can only stay where it is or get better.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, Theo. Innovation in the franchise sector, there's like any business is good, bad, there's indifferent, basically. But the more innovation we've got, the more we are bringing the franchise sector into the real world of the world that we live in. We can't be left behind. If we're left behind, we're going to die. And
well, exactly.
I get that. Yeah. Have you got a minimum performance clause in your franchise agreement?
I think we do, but we don't enact it, to my knowledge. It's a Rachel question.
I was going to say, because then the broader question is who's responsible for making sure that franchisees hit that minimum performance. I guess that's the context of the question, really, isn't it? Because, there's a good argument to say that, that's down to you. You can govern that by the sophistication and the fantastic technology that is in place. So if a franchisee is struggling, you can turn that tap on and get them the bookings that they need. So it's in your control as opposed to the individual franchisee.
Well, that is a really interesting point, and I think to give some balance, where we've had a bit of friction is around where the marketing budget is spent. So we've had a bit of friction where a well-performing franchisee is saying, well, hang on a minute, a lower performing one is getting more budget than a top performing one. Is that fair? I think that's a fascinating kind of leadership question. My general view is let's lift everybody. All boats rise in a rising tide. I could understand how somebody forms a different conclusion. Now, what I would say, which I didn't cover when we spoke, and this is 100% Rachel Brooks, our MD's side, is the other side of Franscape that it's given us is the ability to coach and performance manage, and I don't mean that in an aggressive sense, I mean that in a good way, our network. So what she's been able to do is have insight very, very quickly almost before the Z's do into parts of the business that might just be dropping off. So a really good example is, and I find this fascinating, sorry if I get very excited, but there are behavioral cues before somebody's going to leave a swimming lesson. It's fascinating. Yep. So typically at a very basic level, attendance will start to drop. So if somebody misses more than 3 lessons, they are likely to be considering an exit. Now, it could be they're sick, it could be they've been away, there's various things, right? But there are tells that somebody might be about to exit. Now, when we see multiple tells within a pattern, there is an opportunity to understand how we got a standards issue in a location, how we got a practical issue with a location, and proactively adjust that before they leave, right? So Rachel and the support team have been really stepping up how they support our network proactively. But this isn't us telling them, this is us going, hey guys, on report ABC, you can look at 1, 2, 3. Let's have a call together and go through it. And so it's that difference between, we could be dictatorial, and I know a lot of people think I'm dictatorial, but we're only when we need to be. What we try and do is provide the information and educate and guide our franchisees, and they are largely self-sufficient now. They're running it in their on their own.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I think the point you made about the pushback in terms of the spend of the marketing levy, that actually applies to the management services fee as well. So historically, franchisees have to some degree complained that the biggest franchisees, highest performing franchisees, they're all paying the same percentage, but the reality is that they're paying, the real amount that they're paying is significantly more than the less performing franchisees. But to some degree, they see they all get the the same support, service, etc. So in many ways, if you like, that's how franchising works. And to some degree, to counter that, some franchisors have their league table systems. So you're in platinum, you're in gold, you're in whatever it is. But in reality, if you're turning over 1 million and you're paying 10%, you're paying a lot more than someone turning over 200,000 who's paying 10% in the management services fee and the marketing fee, and that's the way it works.
Correct, which is why as a brand we try and also talk about EBIT, because it's the whole life cycle of the financial education for the Z. And I think that's so powerful, and particularly in swimming, for some reason, like, people don't like to talk about profit in something like swimming, and I get it. Like, there's a big difference between being choose your billionaire villain, right? There's a big difference between whoever that person is and earning a living out of something wholesome. You don't have to be one or the other. Like, there is I think there is a Goldilocks zone here where it is okay to make profit. It doesn't mean you need to start selling kids to sweatshops, but there is a happy zone here, and that's what we've worked really hard with our Z's on, of being like, no, you are allowed to charge for a premium service. Like, you do a good job, it's okay. And I think it's cultural, right? It's building those things up.
Yeah, I think my response there would be, would you rather be the million turnover franchisee paying the 10%, or would you rather be the 200,000 turnover franchisee paying the 10%?
Quite.
You all get value, but choose where you want to be. And in my view, you're sitting in the better seat, basically.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Just a quick question. So, I mean, it's a fantastic collaboration, by the way. I think it's brilliant because you both work to your same strengths. So, is this something? Is it exclusive collaboration, or is it other industry sectors you can see taking from other industry sectors or other franchise sectors, for example?
Jesus, Simon, talk about making it awkward.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Go on, Jacob.
No, it's not exclusive, and we've actually on the back of this case here, we've talking to numerous other brands that for some reason are not using Friendscape but are using another CRM platform, and we're looking into integrating into that because it's yes, Theo has created something that is very, very easy for us to integrate with, because the level of data transparency is just stellar. But there are other platforms out there, and we're talking to clients right now who are running CRM systems, and we're looking to integrate into those. And basically, if they have that data, if they have I call it inventory, if they have that real-time data, it's really those data points that we need in our system to create those ads. There's just an opportunity for us to build on the collaboration with Friendscape, because, as I said before, the data points they have in the data structure and the data discipline is just I haven't seen anything like it. But so that was a long answer to a very brief question. No, there's no exclusivity, but we are also talking to other clients who are using a Friendscape.
Yeah, same from us. Like I've got a very open approach of, it's about giving back to the industry, right? Like I will always chat to somebody about the methodology. I don't really particularly care. I'd like them to use us, but if they don't, they don't, and that's cool. That's just about being a good BFA member, right? Do the right thing.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Theo. Thank you very much, Jacob. We're coming towards the end of the session, so absolutely excellent and really interesting. And again, this will be available on our website for future people to watch. But the people on the call today, I would ask you to pick up your mobile phones, scan the barcode, and leave some feedback. And as always, we invite people to ask for further information, and that'll be passed on to you, Theo, and or you, Jacob, whatever is appropriate, basically. And I did mention that our next event, which is on Friday, the 3rd of July, is looking at franchise legislation. It's a pretty hot topic at the moment. Do we need franchise legislation in the UK? Do we want franchise legislation in the UK? Would franchise legislation in the UK be good or bad for the sector? All questions that we're going to look at and cover on Friday, the 3rd of July. The time is to be confirmed, and the reason for that is that we've invited a guest speaker from New Zealand who we're hoping is going to be able to attend. But 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon is midnight in New Zealand. So subject to his confirmation, we might bring it forward slightly to maybe 11 a.m. or 12 noon, just to, give him a bit of an additional hour timeline, basically. So we're just confirming the time, and hopefully that will be available. It'll go out on the list next week. So thank you. Kat, in particular, obviously, we look forward to welcoming you to the next Friday to make a contribution to that event. And I'll be reaching out to a couple of the other legal eagles as well. John Pratt has confirmed that he's available to attend the event. And as always, John has, I'm sure John have lots of very interesting things to say. So I'm going to finish the recording now and thank everyone for attending.